morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here this morning. The Public Schools Branch has undertaken an unprecedented engagement process through its school review. I want to thank the PSB directors for their time and work. Although it wasn't easy, it was a true display of public service. The school review process saw thousands of Islanders engaged, and we want to acknowledge those Islanders who participated, families, communities and business leaders, educators and students. We have been listening to Islanders throughout this process. We have heard that Islanders feel strongly about their schools and have a great deal of passion for their communities. We have heard that educational excellence must be centered on the child, family, educator, and community. We have heard that Islanders believe that they have what it takes to grow their communities and help them thrive, and that they are committed and up for the challenge. This has been an extraordinary process of engagement. We want to keep Islanders engaged and ensure that they have time to achieve the visions they have for their communities and for our province. For that reason, we have decided that now is not the time to close schools. This morning we met as a cabinet and determined that we would not approve the two closures as recommended by the directors of the Public School Branch. We want to channel the passion and commitment that were displayed throughout this process and support the challenge Islanders have given themselves to grow our communities, local economies, and population. This is not the status quo. Islanders have spoken loudly and clearly, and government will be here to support and work together with them. But all Islanders must take on the challenge and play a role in delivering what we believe is needed to grow and strengthen our communities. The real work begins now. It is an ambitious task, but one that Islanders told us they want to achieve. We believe in the dedication and hard work of Islanders and share their goals of prosperity for all regions of our province. In order to achieve this, it is clear that the conversation must move beyond infrastructure. Throughout this process, we have heard from Islanders about the importance of supporting student well-being to help them achieve educational excellence. We've heeded these concerns and will act by introducing new supports for students, including improved access to mental health supports in all schools across our province. Minister Currie will speak to this in more detail in a few moments. One of the clearest messages from Islanders throughout this process was their passion for their communities and the desire to see them thrive. Our government shares this passion, as recently demonstrated by the creation of a new portfolio of rural and regional development. Our government believes in a united, strong, and prosperous province. We want to help Islanders celebrate and build on our many successes in every region of our mighty island. Government will support community growth and development, working with local community and business leaders to identify strength areas and growth and investment opportunities. Islanders will have a real voice in economic development, providing advice and initiatives to enhance population growth, advise on infrastructure development that supports economic growth, and identify and grow youth entrepreneurship activity. In the framework for economic growth that was tabled in the Legislative Assembly in December, we committed to create regional economic development councils that would develop growth strategies in each region, leveraging strength areas and ensure connection across regions, ensure labor development and youth entrepreneurship are connected to these plans in each region, and to build on existing successes in this regard. We look forward to having more to say about these regional economic development councils in the coming weeks. Today, the focus is on schools, on learners, and on educational excellence. While aspects of this school review process have been difficult and by times emotional, it has been a tremendous exercise in bringing Islanders together in a shared goal and a commitment to work together to grow our province. We are a government of optimism that believes when one region is doing well, all of Prince Edward Island benefits. This process has shown that Islanders share our sense of optimism and confidence in our communities. It has prompted a much broader conversation about vibrant, growing communities and a call to action for all Islanders to work together. Our government looks forward to working with Islanders and with communities to show what we can achieve as the mighty island. A critical engine and platform for that development must be a high-performing educational system focused on learner achievement and excellence. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Premier, and I certainly want to acknowledge and welcome the media. I certainly want to acknowledge Minister Mundy, Minister Murphy, MLA Bush-Dunville, and two strong advocates of the city schools is the Browns, and they're not brothers, Jordy and Richard as MLAs. And I want to acknowledge MLA Steve Myers, MLA Colin Levy, and obviously parents here who have been very, very passionate and very committed to this discussion, and I want to thank you for that. As the Premier mentioned, while the process achieved what it was intended to, it did so much more that it broadened the conversation and united Islanders. It was an unprecedented level of engagement. Thousands came out to 19 public meetings and provided more than 1,500 submissions, and the board and the government listened to what they had to say. We will seize this engagement and we will build on it. Discussions and decisions about education must be more focused on learning, not just infrastructure. As Minister, I'm pleased with the board's decisions. They have addressed significant overcrowding and underutilization issues. They will update school zones for the first time in decades. There will be more equity in Charlottetown Intermediate and other schools. Gains will be made in class sizes and better student-teacher ratios. New French immersion program will be added. The consolidated Charlottetown families will have more capacity to balance enrollments and improve transportation at the high school levels. The board has provided government with meaningful recommendations for future infrastructure planning, and the review has generated a wealth of input that will continue to be used by all education partners. I want to commend the directors. This was challenging work, and they took their responsibilities very seriously, and they worked hard. Over the fall and winter, they worked tirelessly on evenings and weekends reviewing the submissions and meeting to deliberate. The board listened to what people were saying, and their decisions reflect this, whether it was minimizing the number of students who will change schools, keeping communities of students together, rejecting recommendations that would mean longer bus rides, especially for young children, accepting recommendations that had the most impact on learning, and rejecting recommendations that would make small gains but disrupt the lives of families. I also want to acknowledge the efforts of Bob Andrews and Parker Grimmer. I want to thank the District Advisory Councils who stayed focused on their work while the education system was under scrutiny. The councils provided us with excellent input in their first year. They told us that more supports are needed to help students with challenges that impact their academic achievement and to help teachers in growing complexity in their classrooms. We've listened to Islanders. Today, we are announcing new supports for student well-being in all island schools. Action will be taken in 5 key areas to improve student well-being. Core service delivery teams will be established in schools. Community services will be made easier for families to access. Service gaps in communities will be addressed. There will be a greater focus on prevention and early intervention. Collaboration will increase between schools and agencies that serve children and families across Prince Edward Island. Demonstration projects will begin in September 2017 in West Isle and Montague. Core school teams will include a mental health therapist, school nurses, and youth workers. To address service gaps in communities, additional resources will be added, including alternate ed programs and occupational therapy services. We agree that providing services where children and youth are in schools makes the most sense. It provides more coordinated care, reduces stigma, and means less time away from learning. Principals and staff will play an integral role in this new approach, working closely with the core school teams to identify and meet the needs of children, youth, and their families. More details on the student well-being supports will be made available once the budget is released in the Legislative Assembly. I believe the review created a deeper and broader level of engagement in learning. that will benefit the councils and all of us as we continue to shape public education in our province. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank Islanders, some of which are here today, for speaking out on what they want for their children's learning and the issues that surround education. Now the decisions have been made and Islanders' voices have been heard. And I want to close with a quote from Andreas Slager, the Director of Education and Skills from the OECD. If Islanders are serious about improving the quality of our education system, we must start by valuing a good quality education for all Islanders. I'm looking forward to working with all Islanders to help our children achieve excellence in education, and I want to thank you.
Questions? Are we good?
Can you expand on why you decided to go against the recommendation of the school board director?
It's really a question of timing and initiative. When you look at what has been achieved or the momentum that has been built up throughout the province and in communities, when you see the input and the gains that have been made in terms of recommendations around zoning, around balancing in terms of the classroom, it comes down to a question of whether it's beneficial to focus on closures or to keep all of the energies going forward, and to acknowledge and recognize the initiative in the communities that are now ready to form into commitments to achieve the kind of growth and development that we believe all regions of our province are capable of.
What about those who would say that, this whole process, has been flawed? There's been a lot of concerns about the process. Is there going to be a review of the school closure process?
There's been a lot achieved through this process, and indeed through the quality of the submissions that have been made by parents, by communities, the work that's been done by the public schools branch, and indeed this is the first time in decades that our education, I'm going to say our entire education community, has tackled the question of balance and zoning to the degree that it has.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, this conversation was a very public conversation last spring, and as of September next year, we were facing situations where we had no capacity for students and the enrollments that were coming in. If you look at the recommendations that were supported and rejected, it certainly deals with better balance. In respect to the process, if you look at the level of engagement, the 1,500 submissions, the 19 public meetings, the 90 small group and interval presentations, I see the process as doing what it set out to accomplish, and that was to listen, to make recommendations, and to respond to the needs of Islanders. And I think we've done that. Anytime you go through a process, you always reflect back and look at sort of what went well. But if you look at the utilization, it ranged anywhere in the province of our 56 English schools, anywhere between 25% utilization to 115% utilization, from class sizes of one student up to 47. So I think we've moved significant markers. So I'm very pleased, but most importantly, I was excited about the, not that I enjoyed all the conversations as the minister, but at the end of the day, I respect the passion and the commitment that families have for children in communities all across Prince Rupert. And these conversations are as real in urban schools as they are in rural schools. So as I said, I'm thankful, and to me, my focus is on education and building a top-notch quality public school system here in the province.
I think the comment that I saw this morning that reflected on the process was the one offered by the president of the Bloomfield Home and School Association, who described this as democracy at its finest. And these are tough processes. They engage communities around some very fundamental questions and some critical commitments going forward. It involved the politicians staying out of the process until the trustees made their recommendations while actively listening. As I say, I don't think there's a better way of describing this without foregoing the question as to whether over time you might look at this and see if there's something that could be improved. This is democracy, and we have listened and we have made a decision that reflects what we heard.
The trustees did recommend closing these schools, and there was a lot of public feedback on that was negative. So is this a political decision?
Our job as government is to weigh all of the factors, the first of which is educational excellence and being sure that our schools and educators and students are focused on a learner-centered approach. We have further responsibilities to ensure that we are working with communities and working with our province and with islanders to develop in every way we possibly can, and that is very much part of our mandate as a government. And then on the whole question of population and demographics, which really underlies the difficult aspects of this process and this review, we have commitments today to work together with that as a focal point, along with our growth and prosperity. So, from a government's point of view, it's very important to see this as a win-win and a go-forward position. And I would describe that as an overall governmental perspective. And if that includes an element of what you would call a political judgment, that's precisely why the school review process is set up, to have a recommendation from the trustees to then be addressed by cabinet.
What would you say, though, to the parents across this province who spent the entire winter engaged in this process, having to push back against this, putting all their energies? There were tears, there were shouting matches. You still think that that's the best process?
Well, in fact, what has come out of that process from the parents and the communities is a vision, a commitment, an energy that is now being harnessed as we move forward with a commitment around our schools and, in a broader sense, to the growth and development of our communities, our province, and our population. And I would say that that's a major achievement to be at that stage and to know that that's where we stand going forward.
Could you comment on the timing of that announcement? I mean, there was a public meeting last night. The House resumes in 2 hours. Why are you making that call at this point?
Well, if you look at where we are relative to the planning going forward for the 2017-18 school year, it's best for Cabinet to take on its responsibilities and to address the recommendations in a forthright and in a straightforward, expeditious manner. And that's exactly what we've done, the work that has gone in to the submissions, the sophistication of what's been submitted to the public schools branch, the almost 20 public meetings, on the order of 80 to 90 individual or group submissions, I think upwards of 1,000 online and written submissions, everything that needed to be said, and indeed the initiative that's been brought together is in place for Cabinet then to exercise its responsibilities and move forward.
One of the recommendations was more infrastructure for the Glen Stewart Stratford schools. Is there room in the budget for that?
You know, I think if you look at the numbers and you look at the population, and part of this whole exercise was about student population growth and shifts. I mean, the reality of the situation, and the numbers are real, Stratford is under significant pressure. Some of the rezoning obviously has alleviated that pressure short term, and in the northern part of the city as well. So those recommendations are presented to government, and government will consider all of that, and will be continuing to work on population growth. We can't determine where people are choosing to live and raise their families. We have to provide the services and provide the education in those areas. We do have significant pressures still, even with the significant number of changes around the rezoning. So, as you know, as we all know, there's competing pressure on capital budget in all aspects of government, and we'll be looking at those recommendations and looking at a bigger picture and obviously more conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.